Welcome to EddyEd TV.
Don't it feel good when you've been in his presence?
Jordan S.
This story is fresh in my mind since it literally happened last week as I'm writing this. My extended family is odd. I won't get into it, but basically everyone is either a gun nut, avid hunter, or both. Most families go on vacation in the summer. Mine tends to go around winter time. We don't go on typical vacations though. Every season, the adults chip in and rent a house for a week in some random location, usually in the woods. This time around it was a cabin in Vermont. I say cabin, but it was more like a castle. It had to be to accommodate all of us. Now comes the strange part. We play a lot of weird games as a family. Most of them involve shooting to some capacity. Here's the weirdest one. On the second to last night, all the adults gear up in warm clothing and venture outside into the woods for a massive game of laser tag. I know how ridiculous this sounds, believe me. I'm no stranger to people walking out of my life because of my family. The winner every year gets to claim a pretty decent prize pot and a ton of bragging rights. Plus, we played with this really cool industrial grade set my uncle Lucian made. He was the most gung-ho about this whole thing. The rules were simple. It was every man for himself, and the last person tagged won. If there were multiple people left by midnight, the prize was split. Once you got tagged, you made your way to the fire pit outside the house. Once the second to last person made it back, everyone would fire a round into the air to let the last person left know they had won. I had just turned 18, so this was literally my first time being allowed to play. I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't psyched to play, not even for the money, but just because it seemed fun. As we were about to make our way outside, Lucian made sure we all knew how the equipment worked and where to keep our markers so the game would be fair. Then he told all of us to set a 10-minute timer on our phones so we'd know when to begin. Then, without warning, he turned and sprinted into the woods, like he was running a track race. My relatives followed suit, spreading in all directions. I noticed that most of them had run uphill, so I figured going downhill would give me a better shot at lasting longer. It was dark, but the snow on the ground made things pretty visible. I can't remember how many of us were playing, but it was a lot. At least 10 of my cousins and a couple sets of parents, including mine. Our family's pretty huge. After venturing deep into the forest, I found a little perch where I could see decently far up the hill, so I figured I'd wait there and catch my breath. I sat there for a decent while, trying to think of what to do. I figured if I kept walking adjacent to the slope, I could eventually work my way upwards and maybe flank whoever was still up there, so that's what I did. I must have walked along the slope to the left for 15 minutes straight, putting as much distance between me and the house as possible. Time really wasn't an issue, as there were still about 2 hours until midnight. I started walking up the slope.
2 hours till midnight.
Just then, I heard a very faint crunching sound over my left shoulder, in the direction facing opposite my uncle's house.
You being stalked.
I jumped behind the nearest tree, praying whoever it was couldn't get a clean shot off. After a few seconds, I looked in the direction of the sound, but didn't see anything. And then, after straining my eyes, I saw it. A very faint, almost unnoticeable trail of footprints way off in the distance. They led to a thick tree about 15 yards behind me. There was someone standing behind that tree. I was positive of it. And then it hit me. Why hadn't they just tagged me? I was clearly out in the open, oblivious to their presence, and they were clearly trying to sneak up on me. I started running up the hill, hoping to get out of range before they could get a shot off. I was just about to continue back to the right towards the house when I noticed something. Further off to the left was another set of footprints. This one was weird though. It started from deeper in the woods, came towards me, and looped back into the forest. Had someone been outflanking even me? They would have had to walk further into the woods than I had, which I found pretty hard to believe. Before I could keep thinking, I heard something from the slope I had just run up. It sounded like a person falling into the snow.
Oh, shoot.
I continued running, this time back toward the house. I pulled out my phone. It was past 11. I couldn't believe an hour had already gone by. I kept running and stumbled upon a path of footprints heading towards the house. They looked fresh, so I picked up the speed, hoping to catch someone off guard. I passed a line of trees and saw my cousin Corbo walking at a steady pace, laser gun in hand. I crouched and pulled out my pistol. I nailed his marker and it started blinking. He slammed his fist against a tree before shaking his head and continuing towards the house. I grinned, thrilled to have actually gotten a kill. High on the adrenaline, I decided to hatch a plan to get the jump on the person stalking me. I sprinted ahead for another minute, then doubled back until I could safely jump behind a tree without leaving an obvious trail. It was flawless. There was no way anyone following my footprints would know I was hiding there. As I was waiting there, my marker started blinking out of nowhere. I was pissed. The beam was coming from where I had just been. It was definitely whoever was stalking me. I stood up, expecting whoever had just shot me to turn their laser off. They didn't though. The beam stayed trained on me, which actually started to get on my nerves. It felt like they were taunting me. I wanted to know who had been behind me that whole time, so I started walking in the direction of the beam. They never stopped shining their laser at me, even as I began closing in. All I could see were their hands. The rest of their body was standing behind a tree. Just then, I heard a bunch of gunshots sound off behind me, making me jump. I froze. Impossible. I must have won. Corbo must have been the final kill. But then who in the world killed me? I kept staring at the thin beam of light that was still pointing at me, and then the person holding the laser gun stepped out from behind the tree. It was a stranger. Even worse, there were two of them, standing side by side. Just then, I heard a crunch from behind me. I whipped my head around to see a man in a ski mask holding a trash bag in one hand, and a knife in the other. He noticed me staring at him and started sprinting toward me. I ran, ditching my gear and screaming at the top of my lungs. I could hear all three of them chasing me, yelling things that I didn't even think were English. I zipped past the trees and ran as fast as I could through the snow, praying to God I didn't trip. They were gaining on me. I didn't want to turn around, but I knew they were right on my heels. Finally, I could see the lights of the house in the distance. I kept screaming and running, feeling my legs starting to give out. I was so close to the clearing, and that's when I saw Lucian sprinting toward me, hunting rifle in hand. He aimed above my head and fired 3 shots into the air. I heard whoever was behind me trip before running back into the woods. I collapsed at Lucian's feet, desperate for air. I literally passed out from exhaustion right there in the snow. The next morning was rough. My aunt explained that she had tripped at one point during the game and later realized she had dropped her laser gun, which explained how the guys in the woods had one. Corbo had tagged 6 of my relatives before I found him, which is why he was so upset when I got him. It turned out that he was in fact the last kill. Lucian and my dad had run out into the woods with their guns, but couldn't find a thing. They tried following the footprints, but there were so many branching paths and dead ends they eventually gave up. That whole day was a blur. The adults contacted the owners of the house, and we also reported everything to the police. The next morning, I woke up to yelling coming from downstairs. Lucian was losing it, yelling toward the woods at the top of his lungs. I ran down to find a single snowman facing the house. In its hand was the laser gun my aunt had dropped. Lucian fired a few rounds into the snowman's head before shouting some more threats and storming inside. It's only been about a week, but I'll send an update if I hear anything.
Yeah, that situation is definitely, a scary one because you are playing a game. It's basically a game where you're stalking people and trying to beam them, tag them with the laser tag, and to realize that you've been followed by somebody that's random the whole time, as soon as you realize it, your heart is dropping. Your heart is dropping like right on the spot. And, depending on how tall the snow is, that running in snow can't be easy at all. Like I imagine, I never ran in snow before, like up to past my ankle or whatever, or even at all. But running in water is difficult. And water is less dense than snow. So if you think about it, snow will be really tough to run in. So it's more, if it's more difficult, feel like it's more force and more energy it takes. I mean, well, I don't know about energy, but it just seemed like it's going to be a really tough thing to run in. And so tripping, if you trip, it's pretty much over. I would assume. And in this situation, he was really making sure he didn't trip. And I don't blame him, man, because if he would have tripped, he probably wouldn't have been able to tell this story, man. It would be that crazy. So But let's continue.